Welcome back. My name is Owen Wilson, and this is going to be the week 3 video of the truth of winning in internet money. And the point of this series really is just to bring honesty and illuminate just an aspect of business that I think has just been kept in the dark, really. And it's not like necessarily intentionally kept in the dark. More, I think just people are afraid to show this aspect of what it looks like to not just be, up at the top once you get there, but actually show like what it looks like to grow up to there. You know what I'm saying? To build yourself and your business up to that, elite status. And yeah, so that's the point, is I want to bring honesty to what that process actually looks like. So the way that I'm revealing that, revealing the truth is through my performance, my weekly performance, my daily performance, monthly, just seeing every day, every week, every month, and walking you through that, and then the problem solving that I'm doing to get, better results over time. Excuse me. One thing about these videos, I say it each time, I'm just gonna, maybe I'll stop saying it, but, everything's raw, uncut. Just simply put, like, I can't cut stuff out of my business, so I won't cut, or I can't cut decisions and results out of my business, so I won't cut, clips out of the videos either, really. It's just speaking the truth, again, raw, uncut, and that's the same thing for my results. So yeah, I think generally this week's is probably gonna be a little bit shorter of a video. I just completed my weekly review. It was a very challenging week, but also like one of my higher performing weeks. Not in terms of P&L, but certainly in terms of maintaining my just portfolio like over the course of a challenging week. I did make one main mistake on Thursday. We'll talk about that. But other than that, really just holding my money, waiting for, I don't like the term waiting, but holding my money, being available for a time, where market conditions are more aligned with just heavier risk, consistent winning. I've had pretty consistent winning over June. And we're just ending June for this weekly review. We're just ending June. But risk has been low. Market hasn't been following through super, consistently. So just been managing through those conditions. And yeah, overall it was a really solid week. And as a reminder too, these weekly videos, they're a recap of my performance over the week, and also just kind of in general, I might show some monthly and some, yearly performance, that kind of thing. But the daily live trading that I do, you can go and see that I have a playlist of live trading. I'm daily live trading, and every single trade that I take is filmed and put in that playlist, and you get to see, the way that I'm going about just my day to day, and you get to see the results as I'm getting them live. That's the whole point of this series. It's like it's live. It's not in hindsight. It's live, showing the results. And something else I just want to point out too is I'm talking about the whole point of this channel is to bring honesty to the internet money space and really the world at that, but in terms of results through growing and becoming successful. But I'm showing that through the lens of becoming a day trader. And I am a day trader, but becoming a multi 6-figure per month day trader from when I started this series, where I was then, where I am now, and that was just a couple weeks ago. But overall, just showing that whole process. But it applies to not just day trading, but any business really. in internet money. And outside of that, just the problem solving that I'm doing, the way that I view results, the way that I think, I'm learning to think. Obviously, I'm not starting from a place of authority. I'm starting from unprofitability over time to then getting to that place of, authority, traditional authority. But I won't be asking for any of that, really, just showing my results, still consistently day after day, week after week, month after month, just bringing honesty and true value to this space. So anyways, I think with that, it's time to get into my trade tracking software, where I'll take you all through my weekly performance, the way that I've reviewed it, and what I'm going to be focusing on going into the following week. All right, so the main things that I ask myself just on a weekly basis, looking back on my week, the main three questions I would say is, what did I do well this week? Where did I fall short? And what is my focus for the coming week? So let's just go into my, so this is TradeZella. Let me get a tab going with results. For this, you can see the results. Well, briefly, I can just show these are all-time results since I've been tracking data. You can go to previous videos in this series just to hear how I discuss through that. And then just since I've gone all into my business and been doing it full time, this has been about my results since then. And then encompassing this week, it was pretty much a break-even week, but very high performing week at that. So the first question, what did I do well this week? So one of my focuses from last week was to make sure that no matter what, I am risking the appropriate amount. And this is pretty poor lighting. I'm going to turn this around real quick so that you can see me better. So one of the main focuses from last week for this coming week was that. And so the reason is because I've been low risk generally for most of June, just because of market conditions. I have in my system, different parameters set for when I'm going to increase risk and when I'm going to decrease risk, just aggressive versus conservative risk. And then the other thing that's going to vary risk is where I am with drawdown, because I'm trading prop firm accounts with trailing drawdown. Excuse me. So one thing I noticed is that coming from low risk, as I start seeing market conditions where it's higher risk, I tended to hesitate in placing that risk. And really stepping on the gas. I would increase risk, but not up to the point in which I needed to, in which I defined in my system. I would usually almost always I would undershoot in that calculation, whether conscious or not about that. So one thing I did very well this week was my risk was on point in terms of whether it was an aggressive or a conservative risk trade, and then based on also the trailing drawdown at that point too. Now with that, my highest risk trade was a loss on Thursday, and it actually was a mistake. I didn't consciously, it was his first trade, took a short as a failure of London low before ending up actually taking it as a reverse, taking a winning long as a reversal of London low. But there were a few things that were a mistake about the way that I took that trade. One of them was the timing of it was in a low risk time of day for me, and so I needed to have low risk. Another aspect was I did not have, so I learned this from this type of logic called a fail flip. Learned it from my mentor, Casper SMC. And I did not have the reaction defined well, like what exactly I need from a fail flip reaction versus a reversal reaction. I did not have defined well, even though I had things distinguishing things in them. In my head, I did not have it defined well in my system, and I learned that when I executed this trade, and was like something was off about this trade. And so, what I did is I defined, those reactions. So for a reversal, and then for fail flip, defining what it is specifically that I want to see, what type of liquidity needs to be interacted with, and then having my requirements for all reactions, which I knew well and had that defined. So this trade needed to be a low risk trade. And I was like, so why? Like I was not 100% unconscious of making that mistake. I thought everything was aligned, but like I was very anxious, and I could feel something was off. But like I was in a very rushed state of mind, and that was something that I reflected on a lot this morning. It's like, why was I rushing so much? And I came into the market a little late on this day, and at first, I was seeing an opportunity from this 15-minute fair value gap down to London low, but it didn't provide any potential entry per my system till down in this region in here. And so because of that, there was not adequate risk reward for me to enter to get a movement down to London low. But I still felt like I was missing an opportunity. Excuse me. I still felt like I was missing an opportunity. And with that, especially with coming in late, seeing something move, I felt like I was missing an opportunity. I felt like things were moving so fast, and I didn't understand how much time had passed until we got to London low. I thought it was earlier in the session, but it ended up being in a low risk 15-minute period that I have defined. So now again, it's like, well, why was I feeling so rushed? It's like, oh, because of that. But it's like, no, like there's a more overarching reason why I was feeling so rushed. And the truth is that I've just been carrying baggage from having low risk trading basically for the past like 2 to 3 weeks. Felt like I've been getting nowhere, and feeling like if something doesn't change fast, if we don't start having market conditions more aligned with high risk and consistent winning, then I'm going to I'm not going to ever achieve my goals. Like big statements like that, big claims like that aren't really substantiated, and they're not substantiated by long-term thinking. All of what I just said was very short-term thinking. I mean, 2 to 3 weeks in the course of a year is extremely minuscule. Yet it feels, keyword is feels like it is, so much just like end of the world that, I'm not really gaining anything during this week in terms of P&L. I've gained a lot of experience, but not P&L. And so, one thing that I'm going to make sure, just continuing forward, not just going into next week, but continuing forward, is to slow things down by thinking long term. Because when I slow things down, I'm then able to think fast. I've just barely got started on a book, Thinking Fast and Slow. I've put it away for right now. I've actually picked up another book in the meantime. But I can already tell that's an idea, at least intuitively for me. It's like if I slow things down, I'm going to be able to think fast. And what I mean by that is think more intuitively. And and that's what I need to be doing. For flow state in the market, I need to be thinking, intuitively, and not overthinking things. So just, you could call it mechanically or just thinking slow, right? Like reasoning, so much reasoning. It's like in the heat of the game, you have to just execute and be more intuitive. So yeah, the whole part of what I was just saying is to think long term, to slow down the current session for me. Let's see what else with that. Because I'm looking, and I just write all of this in my journal too, just to keep it very simple. So yeah, that's my main focus for the coming week. Now going back to like, what did I do well this week? One thing that I noted is that I managed all trades the same despite their risk. If you can see, like there were very different levels of volatility of risk throughout this week. One part of it that made it what felt like it was more challenging because I went from low risk to high risk pretty dramatically, but that was given higher time frame context and the fact that I had available trailing drawdown at the time. So the reason why it was something that I did well was because I do not change my management based on my risk in my system. However, what I do is change my management, whether I have more of an aggressive lens or a conservative lens, I change that based on the higher time frame context. Whether the 4-hour daily and weekly are all showing alignment, toward, well, I shouldn't say basically like whether the 4-hour is disagreeing with the daily or the weekly directly, or if everything's showing some alignment. That will help me determine whether I have more of an aggressive or a conservative lens on the way that I am going to manage my trade. So particularly trailing stops, because I take profits still generally the same way, but the trailing stop aspect certainly will change. Now with that, something that also changes my risk is the higher time frame context. So what I'll often see is that when I have conservative risk trades, lower risk trades, I'm going to be trailing more aggressively. And when I have aggressive risk trades, so like higher risk trades, I'm going to be trailing more conservatively. It's still the same trailing system, but a little bit different lens. But the key distinction I wanted to make this week is that it's not the risk that's changing how I'm trailing, it's the context and the fact that then those end up aligning, but they're not due to one or the other. If I were to trail, for example, this is important because if I'm in a very heavy risk trade compared to other trades in the week, I will potentially feel maybe some fear. And if I trail to try and limit that bigger loss but potential loss, limit that risk as much as possible, just focusing on how big of a risk I have, that's doing that out of fear, instead of actually just trailing based on my system. Because the truth is that no matter what trade I take, what needs to happen is that I fully accept that risk before I take every trade. And so if I do that, then what that means is I'm going to trail based on whatever is defined in my system, not out of some fear of taking a full risk loss, which I did do this week. And then I turned around and took a win, and then a bigger win. And really, it was a pretty savage performance. So I was pretty proud of that. So one last thing this week that I began that I was sometimes did well, and I'm going to continue in next week, and it's more of a strategic thing. But I've created a habit tracker. I had a habit tracker before that Casper SMC helped me create, and it was just like part of like the STB, this Notion template. But I moved away from that for a little bit because they were at the time, the way that I created them to be was very tactical habits. and I've moved them more to strategic habits, not just like when I get up in the morning and just a 10-minute meditation and a cold shower. Like instead, they're like strategy-based habits that I need to be doing every single day. So like I wake up in the morning, and you can read through them, but two of the ones that I want to specify are reflect on the market and my strategy within it, and reflect on my vision and how I will achieve it. And so those two things, I began to make sure that each day I'm sitting down with those. And it's different from performance reviews. Those are very different from performance reviews. Those are just observing, kind of like just observing the market after hours, and sitting with my system, and sitting with how it fits within the market, and basically just observing like what I notice about that, and learning through there too. And the way that I've been thinking about why this is important is just thinking like Michael Jordan. It's so important to have to execute live in the game, right? That's to have that, to be able to enter in the zone, with the pressure of people watching, with the pressure of just the live game, and execute. That is arguably the most important thing. But Jordan isn't just going to play the game, right? He's not just playing the game. He's also taking time outside of the game to shoot the same shot 1,000 different times, to do the same footwork 1,000 different times. And it's not that is like unintuitive or anything like that, but it's not like the game, it's not the live game. And so what he's doing is he's preparing, right? He's preparing for the game. And so what I'm making sure I'm doing is preparing for the game, right? As I'm shooting my shot 1,000 times, I'm basically, I'm just sitting with the market. I'm observing it. I'm reflecting on it, thinking about, just looking at it and thinking about why it does what it does, more from a contextual understanding and that kind of thing. And the same thing for my vision and the way that I'll achieve it. And I thought this is important as a more fluid thing on top of just performance reviews. You can think of like performance reviews kind of like a post-game interview, you know what I'm saying? So Jordan's going to play the game, he's going to do the post-game interview, but he's also going to go out and he's going to practice. And so for me, my laundry's done. For me, it's that song just goes on forever. I don't know if y'all can hear that. But yeah, the preparation is very important with that. So that's what I'm going to continue doing with that. And what I was going to try and get at is like, I've learned that I have a lot of talent and a lot of things that I do in life, and talent with trading, and I often heavily rely on that. But to be masterful at something requires me to develop skill on top of that talent. So that's kind of the point of this, is developing skill on top of my talent to become masterful. Okay. Where did I fall short this week? So I talked about that risk, that play on Thursday. Yeah. I talked about that play on Thursday. Went through that. %'s week. Okay. So I actually think, where I fell short, that was that was what I was just talking about, of making the mistake on risk and like why that happened. Not thinking long term, thinking short term. That kind of thing. So I'm going to do just a little bit more of like an off the can. Well, it's all off the can to be honest, but intuitive. Just look at my performance in front of y'all since I went all into my business. Just looking at my performance and like what I noticed from this. So what I notice is, given market conditions, like it started out in market conditions where I was confident in higher risk, higher volatility of P&L. And then we've entered this more phase of the markets may not be consolidatory, right? Like we can look at a daily, no way, like this is consolidatory here. This is consolidatory. But for the past 4 days, I would say that's more expansive. Well, past 2 days I had higher risk. So that makes sense. But basically, high risk, high volatility time, lower risk, lower volatility time, so more consolidatory, and this is how I manage that. And then getting back, maybe we're going to have more high risk this coming week. I don't know. So one thing I'm doing just to kind of help gauge volatility is I'm looking at VIX. And so I'm using this just kind of like as a very, very broad outlook for me. So it's like when we see we see periods of volatility increasing and then decreasing. It's like if I were to see, like for me, periods of, rising VIX and overall high VIX, that to me is going to be like high follow through times. So I'm going to use this kind of like I'm going to observe it. I'm not going to use it quite yet for decision making, but I'm going to observe VIX as a way of, potentially just preparing for these different market regimes of expansion versus consolidation, low follow through versus low follow through, right? And just I'm just going to observe it and see if I do notice that. So that's one thing. In terms of my metrics, so profit factor is not too bad. Let me not use bad as what would be an adjective for this? Yeah, forgive me. I'm an engineer and a day trader, not as familiar with English, but so the goal of my system over time is to have a profit factor of 2 or higher. That's the goal that I set for my system, and I'm at 1.84. Now, when I look back over the course of this time, I would deem these very challenging conditions in the market just very challenging conditions. Much more of conditions where where I'm holding my money, just trying to hold my money, instead of making a huge bag. So if that's the case, then this profit factor makes sense to me, and I want to see longer periods of performance and see myself, see through a more, call it through a market where the sessions are experiencing more follow through in the movement. How does my profit factor then look after that? Maybe it goes very high and it's 2.53. That's something that, again, thinking long term, I want to make sure I see longer term on this. So far, it's close to 2. And overall, just looking at the equity curve, I had a big drawdown, 5-day drawdown, and I managed it very well, moved out of it, and still are continuing to make new highs on my equity curve. So it's not the most expansive equity curve, but to me, it's looking relatively reliable, higher highs and higher lows. I'm gaining confidence in my system the more that I continue to see this, and the better that I continue to execute, live. So average win loss, day win percentage. I mean, that all makes sense just in terms of getting a profit factor of what I have. And then I guess just in terms of what I'm working towards immediately is just passing $1 million in evaluation with Apex. Usually it does not take me this long if I am. When I say this, I've blown many evaluations. I've blown many funded accounts. So, I've had a lot of experience in funding accounts and then blowing them without getting payout. But the point I'm trying to get across is I've funded a lot of accounts. And it usually doesn't take this long for me to fund it. But what I've done is I haven't broken my system, right? I've been thinking more long term, and I'm going to continue to do that. And I'm not going to give a fuck whether I'm on evaluation or funded. I'm just going to continue executing my system, get the funded, and then continue executing, get the payout, and then get the payout after that, and then get the payout after that. I want to make sure I'm building, these solid habits. Despite the fact that I would much rather pass this evaluation in like 2 days, 1 day. And I almost did, up in here, but, well, it's moving like that. From what you can see here, I actually started in a drawdown on that evaluation too, so I need another about $30,000 to pass it, which could be, 1 or 2 trades depending on how high risk is coming into this next week, but it could also be a month. I don't know. So we're gonna find that out, and I'm looking forward to continuing sharing just the journey with y'all, and just the daily results, sharing the live trading and these weekly performance reviews, and I think that's it for this one today. It ended up not being a shorter video, same length video. That's okay. So I'm looking forward to starting the next week, and just continuing to share the results. See you then.